This is the Hype Squad with Charli McConnell, a podcast where women can be full of themselves and brag about what they're good at. Each week, we're going to bring you conversations covering topics like motherhood, life, relationships, business, and everything in between, because anything is possible with your very own Hype Squad. What's up, ladies? Welcome back to the Hype Squad. I'm Charli McConnell, your host. Today we have Lauren Beesley. I'm so excited to have Lauren on. She's a former mechanical engineer turned full-time photographer and a business owner who specializes in building confidence and connection through custom portrait photography. She aims to bring each client's best self to light with comfortable, timeless, and fun senior portrait, headshot, and family sessions. Outside of her career, Lauren enjoys traveling with her husband and daughter, riding roller coasters, petting dogs, and getting lost in fiction novels. Welcome, Lauren.
This is super exciting. And this is kind of funny to hear you say this, your introduction out loud. Cause I'm like, whoa, I've listened to all your podcast episodes. I'm like, oh, this is happening real time. And I'm here.
It's turned on. Got
it's
the voice
stepping into a movie or something. So,
my mom was in radio and she was the DJ for a little while. And I always thought it was not a little while, a long time. I always thought it was so fun to see her switch to that DJ voice. Of radio voice. It cracks me up.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you said that because I'm I totally understand that.
Yeah.
Well, but you're here.
Yeah. This is fun. I'm excited to talk.
I love it. Okay. So when we first talked about you coming on the podcast, I immediately said, I want you to come on and talk about how you get from being a mechanical engineer to a photographer.
Yeah. A little bit of a 180 switch.
It's a huge shift, right? And you worked as a mechanical engineer for years before you made the shift. And I thought this would be such a relatable conversation for someone who is in the midst of wanting to change their trajectory and not feeling like they can do it, or it's really scary. So I want to dig in. I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So tell me, okay, let's start at the beginning. So how did you decide to go the route of mechanical engineering?
Yeah. So, little context for, my personality and who I am. I've always been the stereotypical, overachiever, perfectionist type. And that definitely applied to my schooling. So I was definitely into academics, always got good grades. Specifically on the math and physics side, I was part of a competitive math team and I was part of the physics club.
I love that.
Yeah, really enjoyed puzzles and problem solving and things. So that is a genuine interest of mine. And so whenever you have a genuine interest and you are pretty good at it and all those kind of things, your teachers and your counselors start saying, hey, engineering, that's what you're supposed to do. That is the choice. What else is there? You like math, you like physics, you should be a mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
And I was all on board. I loved that idea. There was a secret part of me that was really excited to be a girl engineer because it just felt like I could prove something about what girls can do in a male dominated industry. So it checked a lot of boxes for me. And so I also I had the opportunity. I was really blessed to have a full ride opportunity to Auburn University for mechanical engineering. So that's where I ended up.
Deal, by the way.
Yeah.
Huge deal to get a full ride to Auburn of all places, which is not an easy school to get into. Huge feather in your cap.
Yeah.
I want to pause. Yeah. I'm don't skate over that. That's a big deal.
Well, thanks. I said I was a nerd. I took the ACT and the SAT so many times, even after I had perfectly acceptable scores and I was a national merit scholar and all the things. And so, yeah, I just liked school. And so I also had a deal with my parents. If I got a full ride, they'd buy me a car, which I think they kind of thought that was not gonna happen. And then it happened and I was oh, it took a little while for me to get the car.
Works.
But
it does work. It can work anyway.
Yeah, so highly motivated and ambitious in that way. But and so once I got to Auburn, really enjoyed the curriculum. It was very challenging. And I'm also really proud to say that I graduated with my degree within 4 years, even with including a couple semesters of work experience. And then also a big life milestone. I met and married my husband, Nick, in my 3rd year of college. So yeah, a lot happened. And
busy time.
Yeah, really busy. But I enjoyed it. And by the time I graduated, I had a job lined up working for a company in Columbus, Georgia.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long? Well, okay, let me back up before I go
Sure,
into
yeah.
that. Like, at any point when you were in school, were you thinking about like, is this the job I want? Or were you so like enthralled in the school and the repetition of the work that you were you even thinking about what a job would look like?
Yeah, well, I remember like having moments along the way where I was like, okay, well, like, but what will I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
Because I did like, I really liked the coursework. And looking back, like, I think that's maybe the thing I liked the most about mechanical
Mm-hmm.
engineering. But I did have those thoughts of like, okay, like, you know, a lot of mechanical engineers go and work in the car industry. Maybe I'm not super interested in cars.
Yeah.
And you know, mechanical engineers, they go and they work in like paper plants, which is where I did my work experience while I was in school. And I learned firsthand that like that was not for me. um, and so there were a couple moments where I was like, well, what am I going to do with it? But I also had heard and had received lots of advice on the idea that like mechanical engineers can be hired for a lot of different types of
Mhm.
jobs. Like it's the door is wide open. Even like marketing firms and like places like that are, you know, really quick to hire engineers just for problem solving and those kind of skills that come
Wow.
along.
I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and maybe like marketing is like a weird example because there's plenty of super qualified
Yeah.
marketing
But still,
people.
I could see
But
it. Yeah.
yeah, there are companies that are just like, oh, you've got an engineering degree? Like that sounds really good on paper. Let's interview, see
Oh,
what you can
yeah.
do for us. So
Mm-hmm.
and then being a woman in engineering too, I just was like,
Yeah.
okay, that's a little
Another leg
extra,
in.
you know, edge that I've got.
So you started working in Columbus when you graduated. What was
Mhm.
that job like? Did you feel fulfilled or overwhelmed? Like what?
Yeah, well, it was a fun job. So the title of my job was application engineer, which basically meant I was a go-between like the company and the customers that we were selling products and software to. So I would go out to visit these customers and I would train them on like how to take this product and implement it and like start seeing results
Mm.
and use it effectively. And then back in the office, I was helping with some quality things and you know, supporting taking request for new features and
Yeah.
bringing that back to the design team and things like that. So I got to travel a lot, and that was really cool as like a young person with no
Yeah.
kids. Like the companies that I visited were all over North America. I got to go to Canada and Mexico several times, and even a few times I was able to go to like South America. I
Wow.
went to like Europe and yeah, I think yeah, just a couple countries in Europe as
That's
well. So
amazing.
it was really cool. And so that was fun about until the point where Nick and I decided we wanted to start our family. And so that's where things maybe changed and it wasn't quite as fun to be traveling all the time because we got pregnant with my daughter who was born in 2007 2016. And suddenly I like wanted to spend much more time with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um and there's a little bit of transition that happens like with that job in engineering.
Sure.
Do you want me to just like yeah, keep going
I
through?
mean, yeah.
I don't hardly ever talk this much about myself, so it's a little
I
bit of
love
a
it. Keep going.
yeah. So after we had Lena, like started to feel that like uneasiness with like the type of job that I had, and so I made a transition into more of a design role.
Mm.
And I did that for about a year, and that was it fit a little bit better with you know being at home more. I still you know supported the application engineers a little bit, but um it's still just like something was missing. And I think that part of that went back to like, you know, maybe this isn't all engineering jobs, but that job in particular, there were only so many things from school that I was actually using in the job.
Yeah.
And it was also a very like shallow company organization. So
Mm.
there wasn't a lot of room to like make goals to, you know, get promotions or move up in the company. And so that part of that like overachiever
Yeah.
nature was just like starving. So yeah, I was yeah, that's after I worked in the design field or in the design team in that job for about a year, that's whenever I decided to quit and leave
But
the
so
engineering
the
world.
design part was not traveling, right?
No, so it was in the office. It was yeah, just working at home base.
I want to like double tap on the fact that you had Lena right around the same time because I do feel
Mhm.
like for me too, everyone goes through different types of transitions, but there is something magnified about becoming a mother.
Yeah.
And not just like becoming a mother, but that whole journey leading up to like trying to have a baby,
Mhm.
like all of that is such a transformation for you as a woman. And so it would make sense to me that you would also have kind of an identity crisis at
Mhm.
work and at home, right? Like
Yeah.
on all faces, but your priorities shift,
Mhm.
right? And it's like if I'm going to spend all this time away from my child, I need to be really fulfilled and
Yeah.
happy, right?
Yeah, and for reference, like, Columbus is about an hour away from here,
In a different
so
time zone.
yeah, we had a family friend that was, like, watching Lena whenever she was, like, a little baby, but then she started to get into preschool where they were
Mhm.
having little class parties and things like that, and I was like, "I'm an hour away plus a time change, and
Mhm.
I can't just, like, come back and
Yeah.
do that with her." And I felt that pretty hard as, like, a new mom.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we always talk about like the male female roles in the house with
Mhm.
kids and stuff and about how they are different. And I do think that that's a weight that the mother carries way more than the father
Mhm.
carries. And I'm sure there are outliers where that's different, but I've never heard a husband and father say, I'm an hour away from work, like my child.
Mhm.
It's something that we struggle with really specifically
Yeah.
as moms of like not being available and
Mhm.
missing something. And it is a
Mhm.
huge burden to carry.
Yeah.
So, um, all right, so let's dive into like how obviously like the transition with motherhood and
Mhm.
engineering, the job itself wasn't working out. But instead of finding another engineering job, you
Yeah.
went a completely different route. So talk to me about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so the shift to photography happened, or at least full-time photography happened not long after that. But there was a lot happening behind the
For sure.
scenes, like, throughout this whole time that I was, in school and looking for engineering jobs and things like that. Because, like, while I've always had, like, this very left I'll do my left and right. It's my left brain. My left brain has always been very active with, like, the math and the physics and, everything we talked about on that end. But there's also been a very creative side of me, like, that side of me dedicated like 10 years to learning the violin and, teaching myself a little bit of piano and a little bit of ukulele. I even was, it's weird looking back on it because I'm like, how did I even do that? Like, I'm so shy right now. But there, like, I was in a couple musical theater productions whenever I was younger. I was in different choirs and enjoyed singing. And then on the photo side of things, like, I was just the friend that always had the camera at, like, the birthday parties and the church camps, like, on dates. Like, I had my camera everywhere I
Yeah.
went. Um, so yeah, that creative side has always been there too.
Mhm.
I just didn't really know how it was gonna develop over time.
Yeah.
So yeah, just thinking about how that did change. I mean, I have to pause and, like, also give some, like, major acknowledgement to, like, well, for just for context again, like, I believe in a loving heavenly father who knows me, like, so personally and has a plan for me, and that applies to everybody else as well. It's not just me. I'm not special or anything, but um there was a lot of like, all of this happening behind the scenes. I felt like his hand was in that. Like, he knows what I need to be fulfilled and happy, and that definitely leans a little bit more into the creative and, like, performing arts and things like that. So yeah, I think, thinking of major milestones on the photography side of thing, I got my first camera whenever I was graduating high school. I used to work at Best Buy, and so I did a lot of research on, like, what type of camera I wanted, and it was $500, and it felt like such a big deal, but
Yeah.
that was a graduation present that I ended up with. And then in college, or no, this was after I, like, had started my job. I think maybe I was just, like, bored in the afternoons or something, and I wanted to practice using, like, a real DSLR camera once I finally got one of those. And so I invited families to. I was like, who needs family pictures? Like, you'll get pictures for free. Like, I just need to practice all these new
Yeah. Some
settings.
guinea pigs. Come in here. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, like, I think that is where the left and right brain really merged, because,
Mhm.
like, there was this technical side of me that's like, "Oh, I wanna learn how to use this piece of equipment."
Yeah.
And then there was a creative side of me that was like, "Oh my gosh, people are beautiful.
Yeah.
Families are beautiful." And, I can get really nerdy about light. Like light is like the coolest thing. And it
Makes such
seems
a huge difference. Yeah.
yeah, and it seems like a really simple thing, but it's actually like it's actually not. Like light, it reveals
It's
things.
art in
Like
and of
yeah,
itself. Yeah.
yeah.
I agree.
hmm And it just has like yeah, it has quality, it has color, it has dimension. Like I just anyway.
I love it.
So it just it was easy to get hooked. So
So
yeah.
let me pause for a second
hmm
because what I'm hearing you say about the college aspect is that your advisors and all of the people who were influencing you were saying, you're really good at this, go hard here,
hmm
right? Do you think, because you had a camera at this point in your
Yeah.
life, do you think if those advisors would have nurtured that creative side of you just as much as they were nurturing the math and analytical and that side, that maybe you would have thought about doing it then? Or do you really, obviously, like, everything happens for a reason?
hmm
And the thing I'm trying to go to is, I feel like sometimes at that age, obviously we're very impressionable
hmm
and we want someone to tell us what to do, because that's such a hard age to know what you want to do
Yeah.
forever, and nobody does, right? But I also think that, I don't, if you're good at something, it doesn't mean you need to like do it all the time, right?
Right.
It kind of takes the love out of it
hmm
a little bit.
Well, and I think all the advice was very well intentioned. It
Sure.
was like, this is like the path that's going to get you like the highest salary. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you can do it, you should do it because, you know, not everybody is good at math. Like,
Yeah.
so, um, it, it felt very much like the thing you should do. And so yeah, not as much encouragement on the creative
Sure.
side. Like I enjoyed playing the violin too, but like I didn't my violin teacher wasn't saying like, "Oh, you should
Go
like
make a
consider this
career.
as a
Yeah.
profession."
Yeah.
Um so yeah, yeah.
Were you like in the back of your mind thinking, I wish I could do this full time about photography?
Yeah, yeah.
That was the thought.
Mhm. Yeah, I had a couple moments where I was like, "Man, how cool." Like I think it was even at Auburn, like this is a time and Pinterest is still very popular, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but I think it was like it was really popular for people
Mm.
my age to be like building their wedding boards and like
Mm-hmm.
doing all these things. And I remember looking at all the wedding photos and being like, man, like this is so pretty. Like, what would it be like to be able to like
Mm.
capture this and like do this like all the time? Like, that would be a cool job to be a
Yeah.
photographer that, you know, captures people's stories. And yeah, I don't know
Well,
where I was going with
and
that thought,
I
but
think
yeah,
my question was
bring us
like,
back.
was that seed always there? Is what I was trying to
Mhm.
get to. And obviously it was. I mean, if you had a
Yeah.
camera in high school, obviously that was a
hmm
huge passion of yours. So talk to me about like, because I know it's really hard to like step out of your comfort zone and
Yeah.
take a risk. So how long did it take you to get to the point of, okay, I'm stopping this and I'm starting this?
Yeah. It definitely took several years. Like, I think mm, so every photographer kind of has this like part of their history where they were taking photos not super officially and
Mm-hmm.
then they set up their business
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more officially and you know finally get that sole proprietorship and and do things above board. So officially like 2017 is whenever I started my business and I didn't quit my engineering job until 2019. So there's at least like, you
Wow.
know, 2 years there that I was just kind of playing around with it. And I think that during that time, I was just trying to, you know, grow my skills. And I wasn't maybe very confident about that because I mean, I'm a perfectionist. Like if I know
Mm-hmm.
like somebody else is doing it better than me, then I'm like, well, how could I charge for
Yeah.
my work whenever this person's running around with like the most beautiful images that I've ever seen in my life? And so it took a while to get over that imposter syndrome that
In
happens.
comparison, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then even when I quit my engineering job, this is like maybe little known fact about my career history is when I stopped working at the engineering firm, I knew I wanted to do photography full time, but I wasn't like fully confident in that yet. And so there was a year that I worked in a lab for an orthodontist and I just ran their like 3D printer and I did some 3D modeling thing that's anyway and
That's
worked on
fun.
retainers. Like it was
Yeah.
kind of like a weird gig, but it helped me build a lot of confidence in a time where I wasn't sure if I could make it like full
Mm-hmm.
time doing what I actually wanted to do.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that like like if I were to give advice to people who are starting a business and maybe they are a little bit nervous about it and they're not ready to just jump like straight in, like find something that will support it long
Mhm.
enough for you to be like, just like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, it takes some of the pressure off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that looks different for everybody. Like maybe it's little
Hmm.
side hustles until this gets going.
Yeah.
But that's its own struggle, right? Is the
Hmm.
multitasking aspect of it. Like you can't put 100% in this business, especially if you have a family and
Yeah.
a partner and all of that stuff, because you're
Hmm.
navigating all of those things at the same time. And I'm sure, and because I've felt this in my own life, like feeling like your heart is here, but you're
Hmm.
still having to leave it and go report to
Yeah.
job, whatever this other
Hmm.
job is, and feeling really pulled back and forth. And so
Yeah.
that's its own struggle. But
Hmm.
yeah, definitely support it. I mean, you can't go
Yeah.
broke. You
Yeah.
can't like stop paying all your bills just to make and I think too, a lot of people misconstrue like entrepreneurship obviously is not for the weak hearted, but you can't expect to make a bunch of money right out of the gate.
Mm-mm.
Like it doesn't
Yeah.
work like that. Like it's building. It takes a couple of years. I mean, if you're lucky, sure, yeah, but
Hmm.
that's outliers. Like that doesn't happen
Yeah.
for most people. But there is so much imposter syndrome that comes with owning your own business and like
Absolutely.
fully putting yourself out there.
Hmm.
I mean, for everyone, but it's a very specific type of like when you're running your business
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. So, and then you quit the engineering and you
Yeah.
went full on.
Yeah.
And what is it like? Because we've got other stuff we're going to talk about too, but
Mhm.
what is it like now being in this season? Obviously, you have challenges, of course, but like looking back and seeing how far you've come.
Yeah. Well, and I have to remind myself of how far I've come because there are times even now that I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much more you should be doing. Like, you haven't hit this goal yet. But things have definitely, like, from that starting year, I think, I don't even want to say how much I made the first year that I
Sure.
was officially in a business because it was just, it was nothing. To now, like, I feel like I've grown something that's very sustainable. I just hired my first employee this year, which is just a whole other adventure that we've talked a lot about.
Yeah.
And so the stages in between that, like there were just little milestones that felt really good that helped push. So like getting my first studio, like upgrading to a bigger studio, going to my first like conference, going to my first workshop. We've talked about how I had a long-term business coach for starting, what was that, maybe 2.5 years or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked with them for about 2 years, and that really pushed me forward into building something again that's very sustainable and, not just on a whim, not just based on what all the other photographers in the
Mm-hmm.
area are doing. And so it's been a big journey and I've learned so much. Like I really like there's so much from owning a business that I don't think I would have ever learned working for somebody else.
Isn't that the truth?
Hmm.
Well, and it makes you have another level of respect and empathy for people who own and run their own businesses.
Yeah.
And I think for people who don't understand what that backside looks like, they're like, oh, they're so successful. They have all this, like, wah, you're whining about
Mhm.
owning. No, like that's
Yeah.
that's a huge burden, especially if you have employees and you're responsible and all of that stuff. I want to talk about the
Mhm.
business coach specifically.
Yeah.
Tell me about I, how that was helpful, but also like anyone listening who's trying to start a business, and we'll talk about life coaching
Mhm.
separately and how different the two experiences were. But business coaching is such a useful tool when
Yeah.
you feel like you're in over your head and you need
Mhm.
accountability and guidance. So tell me what that was like. 2 years is a long time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the catalyst that made me like go looking for a business coach was that like I knew I wanted this upgraded studio space
Mm,
and the math did not work. Like I was like there's this big expense that's coming in and like based on what I'm making right now, what my prices are right now, like there's no way that this makes any sense. And so I knew I needed to make a shift in my whole business model that would allow for that growth. And there was a photographer in my industry that had done very well and had a lot of education available, but also had a coaching opportunity. And so I sought out somebody very specific who had, written the book basically on how to get your business from point A to point B. And so those 2 years were spent like working on sales skills that I really had not developed at all because I was just enjoying taking pictures.
yeah.
um, and talked about, service, like just this super elevated level of customer service and serving with empathy. And it was just, right on task with everything I wanted to learn and develop in. And it was just laid out for me, just
Yeah.
step by step. Like, this is, where you need to start. This is how you calculate your cost of business. This is how you decide, what you need to charge per session to create, meet these
Yeah.
goals. And so, yeah, it was a good experience for sure.
Was it specifically for photographers?
Yes, yeah. So my coach was a photographer, but also a coach, and everything was geared toward photographers trying to implement this particular type of business model.
Yeah. I love it because it speaks to the perfectionist side of you that I know that you have, but also it's like, I want to do this correctly. And
Yeah.
what better way can I do this than have a mentor
Hmm.
who's done it, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the same market and the same business style that I'm wanting to do it. And then it's like school. It's
Hmm.
like going back to
Yeah.
school,
It
right?
definitely felt like that. Yeah.
And I love that feeling.
Hmm.
Like I would go back to school any opportunity somebody gave it to me. So I get that. And I think that there is a huge testament towards working with a coach. And there's so many varying degrees, right? Like a business coach like that is very
Hmm.
analytical, and it's like they're going to look at your P&L, your profit and loss
Yeah.
margin. They're going to like tell you exactly how to price your services and how like what level you need to be at before you
Hmm.
hire. And that's a whole nother level of business coaching that
Yeah.
is necessary, especially if you don't have that business degree. And even if you do, sometimes like
Hmm.
that stuff isn't relevant.
Yeah.
um I want to talk about how, because you and I work together,
Hmm.
and I want to talk about the difference between working with me as like more of a life coach
Yeah.
and what that experience has been like for you, because we talk about work too,
Hmm.
but it's like so many other things at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, well, I think like I needed that really specific guidance for the business because I had a very specific problem I was trying
Yeah.
to overcome and a very specific process that I was implementing and needed certain skills that went along with that. And my coach had, tons of experience in
Mm-hmm.
doing exactly that for years. So it was perfect.
Yeah.
Um, but then like I was finding myself in a place where I was like, okay, I'm having other problems outside of the business that I don't really know how to address. So, some of those problems just being like, I mean, you get so lost in your work sometimes you don't know who you are anymore. And so I was definitely butting up against that because I dedicated so much time to
Yeah.
building my business, and getting it over the hurdle that I had, that I was working with. And so I was like, okay, I need to figure out who I am now. And then there was also an element of like, okay, I've built this business basically as a copy of how someone else has done it, but there are a couple pieces that don't feel like me.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I was wrestling with that in my brain of like, okay, how do I make my business more me?
Yeah.
And like, is that okay? Like, can I break the mold of like what I've
That
been taught?
perfectionist
Yeah.
part is like, don't go off the edges. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then like there's just like life things too that
Yeah.
like relationships can be affected by this like single focus on work for such a long time. And so yeah, just trying to dig into all the areas of life that I knew that like I could be doing better at. So that's and I felt very comfortable working with you as a client, and I was like, okay, Charlie's the real deal,
Yeah.
like.
Oh, that's sweet. I just for context, like I worked with Lauren as her client before she ever came and worked with me as my
Mhm.
client. And I love that because it was such an organic way of like
Mhm.
finding each other. But I do think like, and we've talked about this before about like that copy and paste of someone telling you. And I think this is also like that school perfectionist style that
Mhm.
like your professor tells you exactly how to do the problem. And then that's the way
Yeah.
you do it for the rest of your life because it's the way
Mhm.
you were taught to. And it works for that, right? It does.
Yeah.
And whether it's a coach or just somebody in your life who's giving you advice, like they're going to tell you, most of them, the way they did it
Mhm.
because it worked for them.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to have the autonomy to come back and say, okay, this works, that doesn't. Like, I'm
Mhm.
going to take the stuff that works and feels good for me, and I'm going to leave the rest. But giving
Yeah.
yourself permission, especially when you have any sort of perfectionism tendencies whatsoever, is like, but this works. Like, I
Yeah.
want to stay in this
I don't want to
lane.
break it.
And yeah, and
Yeah.
it's working,
Hmm.
right? And I paid for it. And
Yeah.
this person was a professional and I need to do it. And so there is a lot of permission that comes into that. But I think business, like I said, business coaches are great, but there does come a time where it's like, okay, I checked that box, but now what about all my other
Hmm.
boxes that I'm trying to figure out and navigating those? And even if you're not like married and have kids, like life, right? Like
Hmm.
date, like there's just so many other things, and you can get overwhelmed, suffocated, drowning, like how whatever term you want to give it to
Hmm.
owning your own business, because it's like you eat, sleep, and breathe. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I don't even come out of this room for days
Hmm.
sometimes, right? And that
Yeah.
is not good.
Yeah.
And
I'll live at my desk for a while, and
yes.
it's like there's always something to do. And that's like the trap of having your own business.
You're never
There's
done.
always something to do. And if you don't have good boundaries, or you're not also prioritizing other things correctly, you will go into a black hole, and then you're really not available to like the people around you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a hard thing to like look at in the mirror sometimes, because I'm like, yep, I've definitely done that before. And so that's again another reason why working with more of a life focused coach was just like, I was like, yeah, that's the next thing I need to do.
Well, and business is still a huge part of it
Hmm.
too. Like
Yeah.
it's not like that just goes away overnight.
No, no.
And I always say to people, I'm like, if you want people to look at your P&Ls and go through your QuickBooks, then
Hmm.
you're that I'm not her, not her. Like that's
Yeah.
not me. That's more Colby. Colby's my coach for
Hmm.
that. But I'm going to talk to you about your employees, and I'm going
Hmm.
to like push you to like change things that are more like you centered, because if
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur, your business is you,
Yeah.
right? It is, and it needs to be a representation of you. Like it doesn't need to be somebody else's business plan,
Yeah.
because then you're not in there,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
There's so it if it were easy, everyone would do it,
Hmm.
but like owning your own business is not easy.
No.
um I want to talk about photography though for a second,
Okay.
because like I said, I worked with you at,
Hmm.
like, you were my photographer first, and I was blown away by the photos, which I had already seen your work, right? I had been stalking your Instagram for months until finally I was like, okay, the podcast, I have to have pictures for the podcast. I'm going to make it work.
Hmm.
And I remember working with you, and I don't have a ton of experience with
Hmm.
photographers, but I do have some. And it was so special to me that you had me come in and have like a planning meeting with you.
Yeah.
Like it felt so intentional to like come in, sit down, share my ideas, you give me feedback. Like that felt like such an elevated way of doing it. And then when I came in for my photo session, we like the plan was understood. Like
Yeah.
no time was wasted, and I really appreciated that. And your like your photos were amazing. So tell me what that's been like for you, like being able to be creative, also like building this experience for clients, like what the whole thing. What's that been
Yeah.
like?
Well, like for people listening, like there's all kind of photographers out there, like, and my method might not be the
Sure.
thing that you need every time, or, vice versa. Like, your regular photographer might not be able to handle every single job that you need done, like,
Yeah.
photo wise. Um, but this approach of really spending lots of time with clients and doing more of a low volume style of business really resonated with me. Partially because I'm an introvert, and I just, prefer to spend more one-on-one time with
Mm-hmm.
people. And if I just had a book of clients and it was just, like person after person after person after person, like I think I would be so creatively drained that like all my work would be trash.
Yeah.
So I knew like I needed to, focus on just a few clients per month, and make sure that they got like the very best work for me
Mm-hmm.
possible. And I also believe, there again might be some photographers out there that they just instinctively know their clients just from a phone call. But I just felt that in order to really honor somebody and, know what they're about, like you need to spend some time with them and not just
Mm-hmm.
expect them to come in and like be able to be like, yeah, like I know how to pose, or like I know whatever is going to communicate my brand, or,
Mm-hmm.
is going to represent my family, or, whoever, whatever the subject is.
Yeah.
And so that again, that just really resonated with me. I was like, if I can sit down and like get to know somebody a little bit better, the chances of us creating something they're going to love is so much higher.
Yeah.
And so I really love that element of it. And then I also, in your case and other business owners that I work with, so I used to be a nerd about engineering. Now I'm a nerd about like photos and business. And I really love the business side of
Yeah.
like working with business clients where, we talked about how are you going to use these photos? Like you're going to use them for like podcast covers, you're going to use them for
Mhm.
social media posts. And I get to have like a little peek and like live vicariously through other people who are going through their like small business journey. And I just love that. So
It's
yeah.
inspiring. Like,
Yeah.
but also and I say this too about the podcast, like,
Hmm.
how special is it that I get to sit down with women and like hear their stories? Like, what other chance would I get?
Yeah.
Like, and some of the women are strangers until they come on here. And then
Mhm.
I get to, and they're just like telling me their lives. And I'm like, this is such an honor.
Yeah.
Like, even if no one listens to this, like the
Hmm.
fact that I get to do this is surreal. So I totally resonate with that.
Yeah.
Um, and I know, so you've hired an employee this
Mhm.
year, and that has been, I know, its own new
Yeah.
challenge, um, and a big risk to take, right?
Mhm.
So tell me what it was
Yeah.
like expanding your team.
Yeah. So there were like it's always I don't know why, but it's always been a thing that I wanted to do. Again, there's plenty of photographers out there that, they just do it all solo and it is a manageable career to do on your own, but there was just always a part of me that was like, okay, like I remember being at a conference and asking one of the speakers, I'm like, okay, like how much do you need to make a year before you can hire somebody? And they told me this astronomical number that felt like I was never going to get there.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to work by myself
Never mind. Never
forever.
mind.
But then, through developing my business, I was like, oh, okay, that number's not that far off now. Like
Hmm.
maybe I can start thinking about this again. And I definitely have gotten to a point where like I was feeling the stretch of, how much can I do and also spend time with my family the way I want to and, go on vacations and not have to worry about like, is the business going to burn down while I'm gone? And so that really led me to looking for somebody that could help on the back end of the business, even more so than like working with clients. But the person I hired is great with both. So
Yeah.
that's nice. But it's definitely been a transition because so much of what I do like has me like woven all into it and trying to like unweave that and pass it to somebody else is really hard. It's really, really difficult. And that's been a lot of what we've worked through is like, okay, how do you pass this off? How do you I mean, even just like management things though of like, okay, how are we going to handle raises?
Yeah.
How are we going to handle like performance reviews? That's it's just so much that I didn't anticipate on all sides. But yeah, you
It,
set a goal and you figure it out.
so I feel like delegation is one
Mhm.
of the hardest things that nobody talks about.
Yeah.
And I think about it in like the simplest form of like parenting, right?
Mhm.
Like you get so used to doing everything for your kids and like even like your partner comes home and they don't do the bath right. And so you're just like, get out of the way, I'll do it myself, right?
Yeah.
And there is this mentality that I think all of us carry with us. It's just easier for me to do it myself.
Hmm.
And eventually, especially if you own your own business, you get to this place where it's like, I need more time in these other
Hmm.
places, like with my family, with my kid, like it, somewhere myself, right?
Yeah.
And somebody's got to help take the burden off of me. And
Mhm.
getting to that place, it takes a while to even get to that place where you can justify it and make it make sense. And you also need to be a certain level of successful to be able to pay for it.
Yeah.
But also, like, having them come in and then being on your turf, like in
Mhm.
your space where you've never had to share it before, you've never
Yeah.
had to explain the way you do things. This is just the way I do it. Like,
Mhm.
and so to have to go back and write all the instructions or make all it's confronting on another level,
Mhm.
but also that release of control is so hard.
Yeah.
And I it does get easier. It
Mhm.
does, but then it's something else, right?
Yeah.
Then it's something else. And it's like you just went on vacation and you were
Mhm.
able to like
Yeah.
not take your work phone, and that's a huge deal. And so it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a
Mhm.
lot of effort and time, but also you're now like someone is like you're responsible for somebody. Like
Yeah.
their paycheck and that pressure
Mhm.
is
Oh, yeah.
insane.
Yeah, I feel it every 2 weeks. I'm like, "Okay, like, we gotta keep doing sessions because like, I gotta send you home with a check today. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
there have definitely been times like where I've thought like, okay, if this was just me, like I'd be like, okay, like
Yeah.
this was a hard month, like there was a lot going on, like I'm gonna slow it down for a second. But having an employee, like that luxury isn't quite there anymore. And like
Mhm.
she's sharing the load, so that's it offsets a little bit. But just knowing that there's like we're doing this real now.
Yeah.
Like there's no
But
stopping.
I feel like that is also inspiring is not the right word, but someone who is watching you
Yeah.
and it makes you like step up to the plate in a
Mhm.
different way. Whereas you could have used the excuse the year before and been like, oh, it's not,
Yeah.
I can pay the bills this month.
Hmm.
It's fine. But now you have someone that you're not only like responsible for, but is watching you. And so
Hmm.
you're almost like standing up straighter, like
Yeah.
pulling your shoulders back more because you're wanting to set an
Hmm.
example or show a different side of yourself. And I do feel like that is a really good push
Yeah.
because, and I like if Rachel and Jasmine weren't here, I would be like,
Hmm.
I'm not doing anything. I'm going to go do
Yeah.
this instead. I'm going to go like veg a show because nothing's happening.
Hmm.
But they're here and it holds me accountable on a
Yeah.
different level to maximize my time and to be productive. And I feel like too, when you work by yourself, it's so isolating
Hmm.
that it can be toxic.
Yeah.
Was that your
I can see
experience?
that. Um, I mean, I think I- like I was finding like right before I hired the studio manager, like I was kind of getting into moments where I was so overwhelmed I started to spiral a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a big kick, like, okay, you've got to do this now. Like
Yeah.
there's no other time but today to get this done and like have somebody come help you. Because that was not helping me. It was not helping my family. It was not
Mm-hmm.
helping my clients. Like I didn't feel like I was doing my best work because I feel like I was, just rushing to get out the door and like I mean, I still I'm not gonna say I didn't do good work during that time, but
Sure.
it felt like a lot more pressure with a lot less time to prepare.
All of that stuff is so
Yeah.
internal. Like, I'm sure no one
Yeah. On
ever
the outside, nobody
knew,
knows.
like, we
Yeah.
hide it so well. And I remember when we had Tech Etch, Michelle and I were owning and operating Tech Etch. I remember Colby because he was like our business coach. Like,
Mhm.
he's the one that helped me like figure out my cash flow and all of that stuff, right? And I remember it took us so long to hire our first employee. I mean, she and
Mhm.
I were killing ourselves working like 15-hour days, never seeing our like
Mhm.
anyone at home, right? Eat, sleep, and repeat every
Yeah.
single day we were doing that. And we were so terrified of having to pay a salary every month and what responsibility and like it just would come every single month. Up until that point, she and I had just been like paying ourselves a set
Mhm.
amount and it like we don't know how to make it work. And
Yeah.
I remember Colby saying to me, like, what is worth more to you? The extra like dollars on your check or the sanity that
Mhm.
you're going to have by having a better work life balance? And I think that's
Yeah.
what it all boils down to is we finally hired someone and that
Mhm.
was its own shit show of posting for jobs and
Mhm.
interviewing for jobs and then having to train them and then trust to leave them alone. Like it was a whole
Yeah.
thing. But then we got to that sweet spot, which
Mhm.
took months because
Yeah.
it doesn't happen quickly.
Mhm.
That was like, oh my God, I don't have to go into work
Mhm.
until like 9 o'clock, or I get to leave at like
Yeah.
4 o'clock. I get to pick my kid up. Oh my
Mhm.
God, what? Like,
Yeah.
who am I?
Mhm.
And then it was like, that's worth more than anything to
Mhm.
me. And I had to like, we both had to push ourselves to do that thing. And thank God we had someone like encouraging us
Yeah.
and then we hired like four more people and then
Mhm.
it was like but again
Yeah.
it's like your business operates off of a certain dollar amount each month
Mhm.
when it's just you and when you own your own business you can say okay whatever extra I'll scrape off the top and I'll pay myself
Yeah.
if I'm not a salaried employee. I didn't care if I got to check it all at some point
Yeah.
because it was like the business is running. I can cover their checks. I
Mhm.
can cover my expenses.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a wash, I can go home whenever I want. Like
Mhm.
I get my weekend. I get Christmas parties back. Like
Yeah.
Christmas was always such a hard time for us because it was the end of the year. We're trying to get
Mhm.
all these deals in at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And when it was just her and I, It was just her and
Mhm.
I. Like no
Yeah.
one else was there to cover the workload. And that next Christmas after we hired someone, it was like, oh, this is why we did
Yeah,
this.
for
Take
sure.
all my money as long
Mhm.
as you report to work and get the job done, right?
Yeah. Well, and I like something that I kind of see hopefully looking forward, and like I think you probably had this experience too, is in having somebody take some of that time of work away from you, like you do have more time, and like what opportunities are going to be in that time. So like I don't know for me moving forward what that might be. But I don't think that, just I have to be careful in how I talk about things, but like I really love being a photographer and I don't think that's going to go away, but I've always thought that there's something else
Mm-hmm.
beyond photography that I might do at the same time or
Yeah.
whatever, and it wouldn't have even been possible without having someone to help.
Yeah.
And I don't know, do you have that same kind of
Well,
experience?
to me, that makes me think of like scaling your business,
Hmm.
right? Being able to set your business up to a point where you're working on it and not in
Yeah.
it, because those are two vastly different
Hmm.
things. And when it's just you can't work on it because you're in it. You are
Yeah.
working like all of the details, all of the monotonous work that has
Hmm.
to be done. When you hire people, that's kind of the scaling to me, is that you can step out, you can work on it, you can either build it to make it
Hmm.
bigger or let it stay where it is. And then you can explore other things because
Yeah.
that one is working,
Hmm.
right? And for you and for me too, we have very similar business types where we are the talent, so to
Right.
speak. And if, I can only scale this very little,
Hmm.
same for you, unless you hire other photographers, same for me for
Yeah.
coaches, like I have to be here for
Hmm.
this to work. So that's a different format. But, like if I were to charge more for
Hmm.
coaching, I could take less clients and then
Right.
I could work on other things on the side. And
Hmm.
so to me, that's all about
Yeah.
scaling. Um, but you can't ever get there until you
Hmm.
start working on it. And then you can shift the plan and you can,
Yeah.
spread your focus on other things.
Hmm.
But it's exciting to even be able to think about that,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm. For sure.
I mean, because like the options are endless
Hmm.
and there's so many other things. I love that. That's so exciting. We're gonna have to talk about that off
Yeah.
camera. Um, but yeah, so I thought I'm so happy you came on and talked about this, because I remember when you first signed up to work with me, you did your intake form and you put on there, I was a
I don't even
mechanical
know.
engineer and now I'm a photographer. And I'm like, hold on, what? Like, how does that happen? Like,
Yeah.
what in the world? I want to hear this story. And so we saved the story for
Mhm.
this so you could tell it on here. How
Yeah.
did it feel to like talk about that chapter?
It's cool. I mean, I'm like I also meant to say this earlier. Like I don't regret a single bit of the road that got me here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that time in school, that time as an engineer was very valuable. I definitely took things from it. Um, but it's also cool to see like just I love looking backwards and seeing how all the puzzle pieces fit together. And it's just it fills me with a lot of gratitude for all the little blessings and things that happen along
Yeah.
the way that, now have allowed me to do something I really truly genuinely love
Yeah.
as a career. And so yeah, it's always nice to reflect and look back and
I love that.
yeah.
I love that. All right. I want you to share something from your hype list,
Yeah.
which is like an achievement that you're proud of and you want to
Mhm.
brag and be full of
Yeah.
yourself, because that's what we're doing here. Um, and or an obstacle that you overcame in order to get to where you are now. So I would love to hear that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's easy answer, but like, I mean, just building the business that I have today, specifically that moment of transition we talked about from, being one business model to another that's, much higher level of, service and everything. Like, I'm super proud of that transition and scaling the business up to a point where I can have an employee. Like, that's just, gosh, looking
It's a
backwards,
big deal.
like even like 2 years ago, I don't think Lauren 2 years ago would have thought that this was possible. So
Wow.
super excited about that. Um, and then today I'm like this, I wouldn't call this an obstacle, but this is like a first time experience for me, like talking about, myself in this type of format. So, um, thank you for the opportunity on that. Like it was definitely a step out of my comfort zone, but I think it's been
I
fun.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think, opportunities are like given to us for a reason. And even sometimes they're scary and it's
Mhm.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Take them.
Mhm.
Take the risk. Like take the opportunities. Don't say no to every single thing, because on the other side of that could be like this huge evolution for you, right?
Yeah. That's something I took from one of my business mentors is if you're doing something and it starts to feel a little bit scary, you're probably doing something right.
You're in the right
Yeah.
place. Yeah. Like if you're not scared, you're
Mhm.
not doing the right thing. Like it
Yeah.
should be scary, because that means you are moving up the ladder. Like you
Mhm.
are challenging yourself. Like if
Yeah.
you're comfortable, you need
Mhm.
change. Like that's content is not the same thing, but comfort, like feeling super
Yeah.
comfortable, or if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Like
Yeah.
I love saying that because
Mhm.
it's so true. Um, but yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
happy you came and did a podcast. So
Yay, we did
fun.
it.
We did it. We did it. Thank you for coming and getting
Yeah.
hyped with me. Thank you for being here and getting hyped with us. And take care of yourselves.